Good morning, church, and welcome to Monday Morning Musings for the 9th of January. Today, the church with which I am associated, Community Christian, begins what has become an annual event, 21 days of prayer and fasting. And so I thought I might speak to you a bit regarding what fasting is all about. Now, generally understood, fasting is simply denying yourself food, either entirely or in some partial way. And superficially, it seems kind of an odd thing to pair up with prayer. I mean, it's hard to imagine anyone ever saying to himself, you know what would really go well with talking to God? The sound of my stomach grumbling. Now, on the surface, combining fasting and praying seems about as logical as holding your breath while reading Scripture. On the surface. So let's go below the surface. Let's start with the fact that fasting involves denying yourself food, with an emphasis on denying yourself. If you remember, Jesus once said, if anyone wants to be my follower, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now, in that passage, Jesus is not talking about fasting, but his point is that the first step in putting Christ first is always to get yourself out of the way. And that's what fasting does, in a way that is spiritual and symbolic, as well as physical and real. The act of setting aside your need for food symbolizes your dedication to the pursuit of something you want more than food, namely Jesus. But how exactly does less food equal more Jesus? What is it about self-denial that strengthens our relationship with the Lord? Well, I'll give you one thing to consider. For one thing, self-denial teaches us humility. It shows us how dependent we are, how tied down we are to the things of this world. Psalm 35 says, I humbled myself with fasting, and my prayer was genuine. In the book of Ezra, we read, I proclaimed a fast by the Ahava River so that we might humble ourselves before our God. Fasting humbles us, revealing our weakness and our neediness. And God values humility. Humility is a necessary component of your relationship with God. About humility, C.S. Lewis once wrote, in God, you come up against something which is, in every respect, immeasurably superior to yourself. Unless you know God as that, and therefore know yourself as nothing in comparison, you do not know God at all. Fasting leads to humility. Humility leads to understanding. Understanding leads to a stronger, closer relationship with God. That's one way in which less food can equal more Jesus. But always remember that unless fasting is tied to prayer, it's little more than just extreme dieting. We use fasting to detach ourselves from the things of this world, and prayer to more firmly attach ourselves to the things of God. See you next week. Oh, and one more thing. The reason that community chooses to fast for 21 days is very likely the fact that the prophet Daniel, who fasted regularly, mentions at one point that one of his fasts lasted 3 weeks. That's not a particularly important bit of information, but it is interesting. God bless you all.